the day after our 10th wedding anniversary. I placed 2 documents in front of Chad. One is my resignation. The other is a divorce filing. He frowned at me. "What are you pulling this time?" I looked at the man I had once loved so deeply, let out a cold laugh, and turned away without another word. Later, he knelt in front of me, begging me not to divorce him. Chapter 1. Anna, go apologize to Rachel. Chad pressed a glass of alcohol into my hand, his gaze dark and heavy. It felt like a sponge swelling in my throat, bloated and suffocating, making it hard to breathe. I swallowed with difficulty, but the discomfort wouldn't ease. I didn't do anything wrong. Why should I apologize? Rachel wants to overhaul the entire marketing plan, I said. It goes completely against our product philosophy. Heartline 2.0 was built piece by Ethan and me. Why should it be ruined at her whim? Because she's the point of contact for the client account, Chad said coldly. It's just a few lines of copy. Why are you arguing with her? Don't make trouble for me. You know how important this partnership is. I don't expect you to help much, but at least don't hold us back. So the month I spent leading the team without sleep, refining proposals and locking down distribution partners, none of that counted as helping him. I thought that by now, we could rely on our own capabilities, I said, lifting my eyes to meet his. Instead of currying favor with our partners. I was grateful for the dim lighting. No one could see the moisture gathering in my eyes. Chad let out a short, scornful laugh. You're 30 years old and still this naive? Do you really think that even if Ethan squeezes another point of performance out of the product, it can compete with our rival's PR machine? When I didn't respond, he grew impatient. He lowered his head and spoke close to my ear. To anyone watching, we must have looked inseparable. No wonder we were considered the industry's most enviable power couple. I might as well tell you, he said quietly. Rachel is Mr. Wilson's mistress. Her words carry weight. If you don't want your team's hard work to go to waste, go ahead and keep fighting me here. That familiar wave of nausea rose again. I swallowed hard, closed my eyes, and said, I'll do it. That's more like it, Chad said, his expression easing. You just can't let go of your pride. Be good. It's all for the sake of the company. He wrapped an arm around me, his hand sliding down from my shoulder. I stepped back and pulled away. I don't believe it. Believe what? I don't believe Ethan's technology would ever stoop to that kind of dirty game. I looked straight at Chad. The man standing in front of me felt like a stranger. From 17 to 30, he was still strikingly handsome, his every gesture carrying the effortless confidence of a successful man. Yet all that remained in my heart was the Chad who once stood in a rundown workshop, brimming with ambition, vowing to build the best product there was. The old you wouldn't have believed it either. Ignoring the look on his face, I lifted my glass and walked over, steady and composed. By the time I stopped in front of Rachel, a professional smile was already in place. Rachel, I'm very sorry, I said. I'd had too much to drink earlier and wasn't thinking clearly. I forced a smile, raised my glass, and drained it in one go. Chad was wrong. Things like this, I had already done them countless times over the past 3,000 nights and days. The fake smiles. The humility. The jokes. The endless drinking. There was no pride left for me to cling to. You're so lucky, Rachel said, raising an eyebrow. Chad is young and brilliant. His future is limitless. As if she and I were the same, both women with something to hide. And really, who forces his own wife to bow her head and apologize to his mistress? Not far away, Chad stood beside Mr. Wilson. The two of them lifted their glasses toward us and nodded from a distance. Expressionless, I turned and walked straight out. At the entrance, the night wind hit me full force, leaving me in complete disarray. Miss, excuse me, your glass. I turned sharply, the chill at the corners of my eyes not yet faded. The bartender looked at me politely, his smile unchanged. Only then did I realize I was still gripping the empty glass as if my life depended on it. My fingers loosened all at once. A year had passed. The time was up. I walked back to him slowly and placed the empty glass onto his tray. Clink. At last, I let go completely. Chapter 2. There was a knock at the office door. I looked up. My assistant came in briskly, a contract held against her chest. Anna, this is the contract from Klein, she said. Please take a look. The excitement in her voice was impossible to hide. All those late nights had finally paid off. I took the document and skimmed through it. Everything looks fine. I'll take it upstairs to be signed in a bit. Anna. Yes? I don't know why, she hesitated, but you don't seem very happy. I paused. No. I'm very happy. At least I'd given the team something to show for all their work. Contract in hand, I took the elevator up to the 8th floor. I had just reached the doorway of Chad's office when he stretched out an arm, slipped on his suit jacket, and hurried toward the exit. His secretary, Lily, stepped forward quickly and stopped him. Your tie. Chad obediently halted. Lily lifted a navy blue tie and gently looped it around his neck. Chad lowered his gaze, his eyes settling on the bridge of her nose. Her slender fingers moved deftly. When she finished, she smoothed it once more and smiled. Looks great. The color suits you. Chad gave a rare laugh. No rush, she added lightly. There's plenty of time. Don't tell the driver to speed again. Got it, he said. They looked at each other, effortless and familiar. At the doorway, the assistant couldn't hide her awkwardness and cleared her throat softly. Only then did the two of them turn their heads and notice me. Lily instinctively stepped back. Chad's thick brows drew together without him realizing it. Perhaps because I'd made scenes too many times before, his body had learned to react on its own. I walked over calmly. Chad, this is the contract Klein sent over. Please review it and sign when you're ready. He studied my expression for a moment, then took the document. If you've already checked it, that's fine. With a small gesture, he raised his hand. Lily immediately handed him a pen, perfectly in sync. Scratch, scratch, his signature went down. Once I had the signed contract, I turned and left without a backward glance. Back on the 7th floor, I ran into Ethan at the corner. He had his head down, wrestling with the tie at his chest. I stopped and watched quietly. A memory surfaced. In the early days of the startup, it was the first time Chad ever had to attend a formal event. The newly hired secretary, Lily, was tying his tie for him. They stood very close. In my early 20s, impulsive and hot-tempered, I couldn't tolerate even a grain of sand in my eyes. I snatched the tie away, yanked down Chad's collar, and tied an awkward, misshapen knot. Beside us, Lily's brow furrowed so tightly it looked like it could crush a fly. I thought Chad would be angry. Instead, he suddenly laughed. It's special. An Anna-style knot, he said. I'll stand out today. Maybe I'll even land a big deal. Chad leaned in and kissed my cheek. In that cramped, run-down office barely 50 square meters wide, his eyes shone brightly. In those dark pupils, my reflection was the only thing that existed. I was unbearably proud, wearing the posture of a victor. Looking back now, it feels painfully foolish. After a moment, my feet finally moved. I walked over slowly and took the tie from Ethan's hands. His long, narrow eyes lifted slightly. When he saw it was me, they dropped again just as quickly. I loosened the tie, tied a simple 4-in-hand knot, and handed it back to him. Put it on yourself, then pull it tight. While he was still frozen in surprise, I was already heading toward my office. Ever since that incident, I'd been holding my breath, practicing in secret. A narrow strip of fabric, turning into patterns again and again in my hands. Maybe I was trying to prove something. That I was his most reliable partner in business, and the wife he was most proud of. On his birthday, I hid a brand new tie behind my back. I imagined the look of startled delight on his face, then telling him casually that I knew 7 or 8 different ways to tie a tie now, he wouldn't need to do it himself anymore. My chest felt warm and swollen, like it was filled with spring water. I rose onto my toes and followed him quietly to the doorway. Just as I was about to jump onto his back, the door opened. Lily, dressed in a form-fitting skirt, smiled softly as she took the tie from Chad's hand. So it turned out he never needed to do it himself. Every morning, his diligent secretary arrived right on time, carefully helping him get dressed. I'd made scenes. I'd cried. I'd fought. At one point, I even began to doubt myself. Was it because I wasn't a good enough wife? Eventually, the feeling dulled into numbness. Chad always looked exhausted. Anna, she's just doing her job as a secretary. Can you stop making a fuss? As if I were an unreasonable child. Later, I finally understood. Her crossing the line was something he had allowed. Chapter 3. The Klein project was settled. All that remained was execution. I went over the handover list on my computer one last time. After confirming nothing was missing, I closed the laptop. That evening was the launch event, celebrating the first partnership between Aegis Technologies and the Klein Group. In the underground parking garage, I ran into Ethan, who was just about to leave. "Where's Chad?" he asked, frowning. "Why isn't he with you?" Absent-mindedly, I tapped my phone with my middle finger. My screen was still open to our text thread. "Chad, Anna, let's just meet at the venue later." I smiled and explained he had something to take care of nearby, so he went ahead. Ethan let out a short, amused snort and pulled open the passenger door. "Then I'll ride with you. I've got a headache today and don't feel like driving." I sighed and shot him a sideways glance. "Another all-nighter?" "The product's already finalized. Improvements can be gradual, don't push yourself so hard." "You're making it sound like I'm being worked to death," I added. "If Professor Graham ever finds out, he'll regret letting you come help me." Ethan was my senior from the same university. Professor Graham had noticed him early on and wanted him to stay and continue with research. Who would have thought Ethan would claim he was short on money and stubbornly insist on starting a company with me instead? Later, once I learned more about his family background, I understood he had never been short on money at all. I never forgot that debt of gratitude. When the company distributed dividends, I gave him the larger share of mine. Even so, compared to what he had contributed to Aegis Technologies, it was barely a drop in the bucket. He closed his eyes and waved a hand at me, looking utterly exhausted. I didn't say anything more. I stepped on the gas and drove out of the garage. At the hotel entrance, Chad's Bentley pulled in just ahead of my car. The door opened, and Chad stepped out, long legs first. His secretary, Lily, followed close behind in a striking red dress, slipping her arm smoothly through his. She tilted her face up toward him, leaning in as if whispering something. The two of them walked inside together, bodies close. The red fabric fluttered, brushing against his navy suit. For some reason, a repulsive image crossed my mind, and I burst out laughing. Ethan turned to look at me, clearly unimpressed. "Those two disgust you so much you're splitting personalities now?" I shot him a look and moved to get out of the car. "Hey," Ethan said, his expression turning serious. "Honestly, aren't you going to do something? It's nauseating." My smile faded. "Soon," I said. That night, standing beside Mr. Wilson was Mrs. Wilson. I walked over at an unhurried pace and stopped in front of them. Mrs. Wilson glanced at Lily in confusion, then looked at me. Chad released Lily and wrapped an arm around my shoulder. "This is my wife, Anna." I smiled and held out my hand. "Mrs. Wilson, it's nice to meet you." Lily immediately stepped back, retreating to her proper place. Mrs. Wilson wasn't what I had imagined. She looked young, her expression still innocent, even a little naive. Someone who had clearly been well protected. After a few rounds of drinks, I learned that the Wilsons had grown up together, childhood sweethearts from the very beginning. Out of the corner of my eye, I glanced at Mr. Wilson, then turned my head, pressing down the trace of mockery at the corner of my mouth. Chad suddenly spoke up. "Come to think of it, today is actually the 10th anniversary of Anna and my marriage. We've been together for many years now." He tightened his arm, pulling me closer into his embrace. I was genuinely surprised. I hadn't expected him to remember. Mrs. Wilson let out a delighted gasp. "Really? That's wonderful, congratulations to you both." "Careful," Mr. Wilson said gently. "You almost got frosting on your dress." He took the half-eaten cake from her hand and finished it naturally, as if he'd done it countless times before. For a moment, I felt dazed. The image of the alluring Rachel flashed through my mind, and my stomach churned again. Chad had drunk quite a bit, perhaps he truly was in a good mood. The partnership with the Klein Group marked another step forward for Aegis Technologies. I helped the drunken Chad into the car and handed him over to Lily. Just as I was about to leave, Chad suddenly grabbed my hand. "Anna, my head hurts." For a split second, Lily's expression darkened noticeably. I remained calm as I pried his fingers loose one by one. The moment I freed myself, he grabbed on again. "Anna, let's go home. Please." I hesitated, then got into the car after all. The ride passed in silence. Neon lights flickered past, washing over our faces in shifting patterns of light and shadow. When we got home, Lily was still fussing. You can't let him sleep it off right away. Use a warm towel first, make sure you wipe the back of his neck. And the medicine is in the side cabinet in the living room. Lily, I interrupted evenly. She pressed her lips together and met my gaze. Relax, I said softly, lowering my eyes with a faint smile. Relax, Lily. You're showing your hand. Chapter 4. Chad woke up on the couch. Warm amber light poured in from all directions, dust motes dancing in the air. I gently rolled my stiff neck and stood up. I opened the balcony door. Outside, the sun was rising, the morning mist slowly dissolving. There was a soft rustle behind me. Soon, the sound of running water came from the bathroom, then stopped. After a while, footsteps approached. I'm heading out, he said. There's a management meeting today. You shouldn't be late either. Wait, I called out. Chad stood in the middle of the living room, a deep red tie still clenched in his hand. I stepped closer and pinched one end of the tie. Let me do it for you today. He hesitated for a second, his head tilting unconsciously toward the doorway. I pretended not to notice. All right, he said, releasing it. I took the tie, rose onto my toes, and looped it around his neck. My right hand held the wide end, I left the narrow one, cross, wrap, slip it through the loop. I lifted my eyes and met his gaze. My hands tightened the knot slowly. A flicker passed through Chad's eyes. He leaned down and brushed his lips against mine. It looks beautiful. Will you tie my tie for me every day from now on? He looked genuinely pleased, the sharp edge in his features melting away. The corners of my mouth curved up as I smoothed the surface of the tie carefully. There's no if from now on. Just this once. Next time, you can let the one waiting outside come in and do it for you. Chad took it as playful jealousy and looked at me with an ambiguous smile. Suddenly, he reached out and pinched my cheek. His cool lips pressed down hard. The door opened, then closed again. Lily's pale face flashed past for an instant. The room fell silent once more. The smile on my lips had long since vanished. At Aegis Technology's monthly management meeting, I arrived late. As I pushed open the conference room door, the room went quiet for a beat. A bright blue silk dress swayed softly with each step I took. The hair I used to keep tied up was loose now, softly curled chestnut strands spilling over my shoulders. I moved with an easy grace to the seat on Chad's left, pulled out the chair, and sat down smoothly. Across from me, Ethan, who had been slouched back with a gloomy expression, straightened abruptly, sitting up perfectly straight. Chad's gaze fixed on me, unblinking. Only Lily pressed her lips together, her face drained of color. I lifted a hand toward the marketing manager who had been speaking. Please continue. Only then did the others react. This really was the same vice president they knew, the one who showed up every day looking worn down, always in dark gray suits, the boss's wife. As the meeting drew to a close, Chad gave his usual brief summary and raised a hand, ready to adjourn. Give me 2 minutes, I said suddenly. There's one small matter I'd like to address. Every eye in the room turned to me. From beneath my folder, I pulled out a sheet of paper. Effective today, I will be ending my employment with Aegis Technologies. The departments I oversee, the marketing division and the R&D center, will temporarily be transferred to Chad. Further arrangements will be decided by the company. Anna. Chad stared at me in disbelief, his breathing turning heavy. His lips parted several times, but in the end, he forced himself to hold back. Come to my office. He shot to his feet, anger radiating off him, and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I followed at an unhurried pace, calm and unruffled. Out in the corridor, Ethan stopped me. What are you trying to do? I don't want this job anymore. Just because of those two? His brow furrowed, anger flickering through his voice. You're really going to throw away everything you've worked for all these years? This was never what I wanted in the first place, I said after a brief pause. I'm sorry, Ethan. I dragged you into this with me. We'll talk about your situation later. Oh, and one more thing. I tilted my head. Do I look good today? Ethan's perpetually world-weary expression froze instantly. He turned his face away stiffly, his tongue nearly tying itself in a knot. You look good. Thank you, I said with a light, playful smile. It's my last day. I want to look nice when I say goodbye. Heels clicking, I walked into Chad's office. He was leaning back in his executive chair, eyes dark and stormy, watching me approach step by step. I placed 2 documents on his desk. One is my resignation. The other is divorce papers. What are you pulling now? Chad's voice was cold as ice. I suddenly smiled. Chad. I met you when I was 17. I married you at 20. No ring. No wedding. No blessings. Nothing but a piece of paper. At 22, you said you were about to give up. I walked away from my own graduate plans, sold the only property my parents left me, and poured everything I had into supporting your startup. For your happiness, I was willing to do everything that made me unhappy. It's not that I enjoy suffering or self-destruction, I said, pressing a finger lightly to my chest. There was something here holding me up. But now, that something is gone. I let out a quiet breath. I need to leave you before I'm completely used up. You regret it? Chad stared at me. Yes, Chad. I regret it. The vast office fell into sudden silence. The polished marble floor reflected 2 distorted silhouettes. Chapter 5. That same day, I moved out of the villa. I had bought the apartment a year earlier. It was not far from my alma mater. On my first day of doing nothing, I turned off my phone and slept deeply all day. The next day, I visited a former mentor, then had dinner at the university cafeteria. I wandered slowly through the campus, the warm, bustling noise brushing past me, a rare sense of calm settling in my heart. Everywhere I looked, traces of Chad and me were scattered all around this place. And yet, not a single ripple stirred in my heart anymore. After having a few drinks on the street behind campus, I headed home feeling content, a bag of grilled skewers swinging in my hand. At the doorway, a red glow flickered. I paused, keyed in the code. Finish your cigarette before coming in. Chad stubbed it out and followed me inside. Sit wherever you like. I put my things away and went into the bathroom to wash my face. When I came out, Chad was still standing there. I can't figure it out, he said, his voice hoarse the moment he spoke. I pulled out a dining chair, sat down, and started eating the skewers. Anna, I've been thinking these past few days, Chad said. He licked his dry lips. I know I messed up in some ways. I neglected you. I'm sorry. You said it yourself, we've been married 10 years, not 10 days. We're not young anymore. Marriage isn't a joke. I don't want us using divorce as a way to vent our anger. I'm not acting on impulse. You know that, I said, swallowing a soggy piece of potato. I don't talk about leaving lightly. When I say it, I mean it. Anna. Chad pinched the bridge of his nose, barely holding back his irritation. Then give me a reason. Why are you being so serious this time? Is it really just because I asked you to apologize to Rachel? You think I wanted that? Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for me too? But I did it for the company, for our future. You don't understand me at all. The more he spoke, the angrier he became. We went through so much back then and made it through together. Now that life is finally better, you start making trouble, is that it? Anna, haven't I treated you well? Back then, I had less than $1,000 to my name. You wanted to save that sick dog, I handed over every cent without hesitation. I split a pack of instant noodles with you even when it cost next to nothing. Haven't I treated you well? Chad slammed his fist onto the table, as if trying to release all the resentment that had built up inside him. My eyelashes trembled, my gaze dropping weakly. Back then, neither of us had imagined the vet bill would be so expensive. When we saw the total, Chad and I both froze, our faces flushing. He patted my head to comfort me and pulled out his bank card. My chest ached. I even started to regret my reckless kindness. We could barely keep ourselves alive. 2 poor kids in our early 20s, with nothing to our names. And yet he was still willing to empty his pockets without a second thought, just to protect my naive compassion. A single packet of cheap instant noodles, we pushed it back and forth, and he would only eat what was left. Late at night, Chad got so hungry he secretly gulped down cold water to fill his stomach. I held him and cried uncontrollably. Anna, just wait a little longer, Chad said, wrapping his arms tightly around me. His voice was low and hoarse, filled with tenderness. I won't let you suffer forever. I pulled out a napkin and wiped the oil stains dripping onto the tabletop. Chad, I saw it. Saw what? I turned my head to look at him. Last September 3rd. Your deal with Mr. Shaw from Northbridge fell through. You walked out, but you didn't go home. You came back to the office that night. I paused. I saw it. Chad swayed, as if a bucket of cold water had been dumped over his head. The barrage of questions and anger from moments ago died instantly. For the past year, I had imagined it every day and every night. After tearing off every last disguise, I would stand on moral high ground and accuse him, judge him. In my imagination, that revenge was intoxicating. But now, with everything laid bare, all I felt was relief, as if the dust had finally settled. Anna. His expression shifted again and again. His throat bobbed, but no words came out. A man well over 6 feet tall stood helplessly beneath the crystal chandelier. He still knew my weakness. So many times before, the moment he showed vulnerability, I would give in without protest. Anna. There was something shattered in his eyes now, along with a quiet, desperate plea. It was just like 10 years ago. A boy's trembling hand, cautious, tentative, reaching out. Marry me, okay? I swear, I'll treat you well for the rest of my life. Chapter 6. Mr. Shaw's greasy hand reached toward me again, deliberately or not. I took a deep breath, lifted my glass, and sidestepped him. Mr. Shaw, I'll drink this one, I said, forcing my lips into a smile. I hope your company will reconsider the terms of the partnership. I tilted my head back and drained it. The high-proof liquor burned like fire, scorching its way through my insides. I hated these endless rounds of drinks that felt like shackles. I hated the leering look in the man's eyes across from me. I hated this glittering, foul-smelling room. But I couldn't just walk away. If I did, the contract would be finished. I couldn't bear to see all of Chad's hard work turn to nothing. When I finally left the table, I clutched the contract in excitement, eager to tell Chad the good news right away. I called him until my phone died. Still, no answer. As if it were fate. On impulse, I went back to the office. At 11 at night, the building was swallowed in darkness. Only a few corridor lights were on, casting a dim glow. On the 8th floor, the general manager's office door was left slightly ajar. Inside, there was no light at all. Just as I was about to turn and leave, the sudden sound of a chair shifting came from within. I held my breath and stopped. Faintly, I heard a man's low, ragged breathing. My heart seized. As if a huge hand had closed around it. Rigid, I moved forward step by step. Through the narrow gap, I looked inside, at the man I knew better than anyone. Chad's eyes were closed. He was reclined in his executive chair. And beneath him, there was a flash of gold fabric, the hem of a skirt. The same one I had seen on Lily earlier that night. That large hand tightened suddenly. Boom. My heart shattered all at once, crushed into blood and pulp. Nausea surged up violently. I clapped a hand over my mouth and ran, stumbling out. On the empty street, I cried like a mad woman, sobbing until I couldn't breathe. Until there was nothing left in my body to give. This was an ending I had never imagined. Every belief I held, every bit of resolve, I watched them collapse completely. 10 years of love. I had always believed only death could part us. I never thought he would get off halfway through the journey. The grilled meat in my mouth tasted dry. I chewed it over and over, my throat scraping painfully as I swallowed. Don't worry. I didn't ask for more than I should have, I said. It's all written clearly in the agreement. The company goes to you, the savings and the property to me. It's fair. Anna. Chad opened his mouth in pain, as if he couldn't breathe. Listen to me. It's not what you think, he said, taking a step toward me. I was under too much pressure back then. It only happened once. Really. We didn't cross that line. Chad braced a hand on the dining table. She initiated it. It was just to help me release some stress. My mistake was not stopping it, Anna. Believe me. I would never do anything to betray you. I warned Lily afterward. I looked at him quietly. Our eyes met, and Chad suddenly lost his voice, his lips parting and closing without sound. I spent 6 months seeing a psychiatrist, I said, opening the drawer and placing 2 pill bottles on the table. And a full year on antidepressants. Chad staggered. I thought I was going to lose my mind. I let out a low laugh. Night after night, I couldn't sleep. My hair fell out in clumps. I kept denying myself, tearing myself down, then forcing myself to rebuild the next day. I couldn't understand it, after 10 years together, why you still had to make me lose. I tugged at the corner of my mouth. Later, I stopped trying to understand. I'm only 30. Not already 30. I still have a long future ahead of me. I can't keep wasting it in a dead end like this. I drew in a slow breath. So I gave myself 1 year, a buffer, to leave you. How can you say it so lightly? Chad lowered his head, the shadow of his long lashes falling across his face. Once you've adjusted, you'll just abandon me? Chad. The heat I had held back all night burned fiercely behind my eyes. Let's stop here. A few drops of heat fell, splashing into the cold oil. Can't we part on good terms? Chad rushed forward 2 steps and dropped to his knees in front of me, choking back tears. I don't want a divorce. I can't live without you, Anna. What am I supposed to do without you? I drew my legs up, hugged them, and turned my head aside, sniffing quietly. After night falls, even shadows leave. No one dies just because they lose someone else. Chapter 7. By the time all the transfer procedures were completed, it was already the height of summer the following year. Chad and I said goodbye outside the courthouse. Where are you going? I'll drive you. No need. I drove myself. Chad stood gloomily by the car, stubble dotting his chin. Anna, I agreed to the divorce only to make you happy. We'll get back together, he said, ripping the divorce papers. After a pause, he added, I'll wait until you cool off. I'm going. I wish you a smooth road ahead. I waved, turned away, and left his deliberately vulnerable gaze behind me. Things went smoothly with Professor Graham. The early discussions went well, and my direct entry graduate application was already submitted. With the recommendation letter in hand, I boarded a flight to London. For the 11-hour journey, I put on an eye mask, planning to sleep the entire way. Cold air blasted from above, and I instinctively curled inward. Suddenly, a warmth wrapped around me. I turned slightly and drifted into sleep. When the landing announcement sounded, I woke slowly. As if sensing something, I pulled off the eye mask and looked to my side. It was only a stranger. The warmth from before, perhaps a dream, perhaps an illusion. I tugged at my lips in self-mockery, stood up, and went to collect my luggage. My schedule in London wasn't tight. I treated it as a trip to clear my mind. In the past, all my focus had been poured into Chad's career. I always thought that if I waited a little longer, tried a little harder, we would surely have a bright future. But now, there was no longer even an huss. Under the night sky, the London Eye across the river stood silent and still. I lowered my head and let out a soft laugh, rubbing my wind-chilled cheeks. How much longer are you planning to follow me? About a meter behind me, the man pretending to take photos nearly jumped out of his skin. How did you notice? Ethan pulled off his baseball cap and black mask. His eyelids drooped slightly, as if he hadn't fully woken up. I covered my face. And I kept my distance the whole time. Come on, I said, rubbing my forehead helplessly. I've known you for 12 years. Just like Chad. The air froze. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind's this strong and you're not afraid of getting blown away? Ethan tugged off his windbreaker and tossed it into my arms. Which hotel are you staying at? I'll take you back. I held back a smile and didn't expose him. I'd noticed his sneaky presence the moment I checked in. Let's go, Ethan. I wrapped myself in his jacket and smiled slowly. I'm buying you a drink. We settled into an open-air bar nearby. Ethan swirled his glass and shot me a sideways glance. I resigned too. I looked up in surprise, and he hurriedly added, everything I was handling has been properly handed over. The Randy side can manage just fine. I choked slightly. You don't need to explain yourself to me. Of course I do, he snorted. In case something happens to him and you soften again and run back. I won't. The raspberry sweet liquor slid smoothly down my throat. Ethan lifted his gaze and watched me without blinking. Really, I said, my eyes curving into a smile. This time, even if I die, I won't turn back. Ethan let out a barely perceptible breath of relief. Honestly, Aegis Technologies is doing very well right now. You didn't have to leave at this point. I paused. If you did it because of me. I'm just tired of it, Ethan cut in. He leaned back lazily in his chair, long fingers tracing circles around his glass. When I thought about it, school suits me better. And Professor Graham happens to need people again. And besides. He lowered the brim of his cap, a little shy. I'm used to sticking with you. The corner of my mouth lifted despite myself, and slowly fell again. I sank back into my chair as well, letting the distant blue glow sweep over my face again and again. Flickering. With Ethan's help, the research projects I took on at several universities went exceptionally smoothly. With the extra time, we made the most of it, traveling freely through the surrounding cities. Our final stop was Norway. Unfortunately, it wasn't the best season to see the northern lights. It's fine, Ethan said, his broad hand resting on the top of my head. I'll bring you back next year. I promise, you'll see them. Click. Ethan and I turned at the same time. The hotel owner smiled warmly and handed us the camera. In the photo, the man in black was smiling, bent slightly as if coaxing someone. I want to post it, Ethan said, glancing at me. Just as a keepsake. Is that okay? Professor Graham urged us relentlessly. 3 months later, we finally boarded a flight back home. When we arrived downstairs at my building, Ethan insisted on carrying my luggage upstairs. There's a direct elevator. It's really not much effort, I said, more than a little speechless. Who was it that tripped right at the elevator door the other day? Ethan shot me a sideways look. That was, I. My words cut off abruptly. A tall figure stood in the dark corner, a faint halo of light outlining him. Anna. Come here. Chad's voice sounded like rough gravel ground against stone. The suitcase hit the ground with a dull clack. Ethan placed a hand on my shoulder and moved me behind him. The man who was usually lazy and laid back straightened, a sharp chill radiating from him. Ethan? I whispered. Ethan tilted his head slightly. All I could see was the taut line of his jaw. You promised, he said quietly. This time, you won't turn back. Chapter 8. After enrolling, my days were overwhelmingly busy. Aside from classes, Professor Graham had me involved in several of his ongoing projects. Ethan, meanwhile, openly hovered around me in plain sight. I hadn't thought about Chad for a very long time. Busyness and time truly were the best remedies. On the eve of Professor Graham's birthday, Ethan dragged me to the mall to buy a gift. We had just reached the 5th floor. A familiar figure appeared without warning, right behind a display window. My feet froze in place. It had been more than half a year since we'd last parted on bad terms outside my building. I ignored every one of his calls and messages. Ethan had even insisted I move into the campus dorms. Later, I heard there were problems in the company's supply chain, leaving him with no time to look for me. I never imagined we'd meet again like this. Ethan turned me by the shoulders, his expression dark. It's been almost 2 years. Do you still care? My throat felt stuffed with cotton, sealed tight. I stood there with my mouth open, not knowing how to explain myself. I could only shake my head. Let's go, Ethan said, gripping my forearm. I'll take you to eat first. I followed him a few steps, then turned back again. Under the warm white lights, Lily was smiling, holding up 2 baby bottles, her lips moving non-stop. I couldn't tell whether she was comparing their colors or their materials. The man in the gray suit showed only half his profile. I couldn't see his expression clearly. What do you want to eat? Hot pot, or? I want to go home. I stopped short. Anna. Ethan turned around, his brows arching sharply. I tilted my head back, and tears poured down all at once. I really want to go home. In the end, I still didn't make it home. Ethan said my place had been empty for too long, lacked warmth, and took me back to his apartment instead. With a dark expression, he pushed me onto the sofa. Then he brought over warm water and gently wiped my face with a cloth. He seemed angry. The warm towel lingered over my eyes a little longer. After a moment, I reached out and pressed his hand down. Ethan, I have SLE. What? His long brows drew tight. SLE? Lupus. An autoimmune connective tissue disease. I gradually calmed down. It can't be cured. I have to take medication for life. And I can't have children, there's a high risk of flare-ups, and of passing it on. Will it kill you? His eyes reddened faintly. Why did you never tell me? It's not that serious, I said, seeing how alarmed he looked and feeling a bit guilty instead. As long as it doesn't flare up, it's fine. Look at me, I'm doing just fine. Perhaps reminded of the baby store we'd just seen, Ethan's expression darkened again. That bastard Chad. Was it because you couldn't have children that he got involved with that secretary? No. I froze for a second, then couldn't help doubting my own judgment. Chad said he didn't care, but did he really not care? SLE is something some people are born predisposed to. If you're lucky, it may never surface in your lifetime. I was clearly not one of the lucky ones. In the second year of the startup, I worked myself to complete exhaustion, and the dormant genes in my body fully erupted. That was the first time I ever saw Chad break down. He stopped going to the company, staying by my side day and night. The was packed, so we spent the night on a gurney in the hallway, holding each other to keep warm. Chad, let's get divorced, I said back then, when I was little more than a wreck. After months of intensive treatment, my body was so swollen I barely recognized myself. I'm a ticking time bomb. Even if I'm fine this time, who knows when it'll relapse again. The moment I spoke, my lips trembled with pain. I'm afraid I won't be able to have children either. I can't be that selfish, not even taking away your chance to be a father. I bit down hard on the button at his chest, not daring to make a sound even as I cried. Chad shut his eyes tightly. Anna, my love, he said, cupping my face, kissing me again and again. We won't separate. I don't want children. I just want you. Just the two of us, let's live our lives well, together. I propped my face in my hand, forced a smile, and curled a finger to wipe at the corner of my eye. I almost wish he'd never been that good. Stop smiling, Ethan said, wringing out the cloth again and wiping my face. You look worse than when you cry. It's fine, I said quietly. He found a healthy partner. Naturally, he'll have a baby. Ethan let out a short laugh. You're really that generous? You don't hate him anymore? Hating someone is exhausting, I said, burying most of my face into my knees. I ran out of strength a long time ago. Chapter 9. Anna, Ethan licked his lips. Actually, I have SLE, I cut him off. So, Ethan, I can't give you any kind of response. Over the past 2 years, it wasn't that I hadn't noticed. He simply liked to joke things away, never making anything explicit. Ethan tossed the cloth aside and suddenly pulled me into a tight embrace. That means you're willing to accept me. Wait, what are you talking about? I struggled hard, pushing him back a few inches. He looked straight into my eyes. Because you said you can't, not that you don't want to. Did you even hear what I said? So what? He cut in. I'm firmly child-free. Don't tell me you didn't know that. I shook my head, about to speak, when my phone suddenly rang. It was Chad. After hesitating for a few seconds, I still answered. Anna, was that you outside the shop just now? His voice was slightly breathless. I don't think I saw wrong. I was buying a gift for a client's kid. It wasn't what you. He lowered his voice. I said I'd wait for you to come back, and I won't do anything that would hurt you again. Don't overthink it. Chad, none of this has anything to do with me anymore. Anna. Ethan suddenly snatched the phone away. If you were really worried about her misunderstanding, you should have fired that woman ages ago. You act righteous while accusing her of not trusting you, yet you and your secretary cling to each other like conjoined twins. Hypocrites like you are exactly what people mean. This is your final warning, stop bothering my girlfriend. Otherwise, don't expect to keep those remaining suppliers either. He hung up, powered off the phone, and tossed it onto the couch. The supply chain issue last time, that was you? Feeling sorry for him now? Ethan snapped, taking several deep breaths to calm himself. I just had my dad give him a bit of trouble. I didn't really hurt him. For a moment, we stared at each other, neither of us saying a word. I'll take you tomorrow to change your phone number, Ethan broke the silence first. Stop staying in touch with that bastard. Ethan, I'm sorry. My chest felt hollow, aching faintly. I really can't. Don't waste yourself on me. Ethan pressed his lips together and turned his head away. You're not even my girlfriend. You don't get to decide that. On the night of Professor Graham's birthday, I accepted the overseas assignment in front of everyone. Ethan raised his brows, hurt, confused, before finally lowering his gaze. After the gathering ended, I thought about it and stopped him anyway. Even if I wanted him to give up, I didn't want to do it like this. It's not to avoid you. I genuinely want to go study, I explained patiently. I applied a long time ago. You can ask Professor Graham. Ethan's eyes lit up instantly. I felt a headache coming on and pinched the bridge of my nose. This departure, too, didn't go smoothly. The moment I arrived at the airport, Professor Graham called me back. I ran the entire way to the hospital. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might leap out of my chest. I pushed open the ward door and saw Ethan being scolded by Professor Graham, who was pointing right at his nose. Your parents are flying back tomorrow. How do you plan to explain this? I hurried over, still out of breath. I looked him over from head to toe. What happened to you? His brain's gone completely off the rails, Professor Graham snapped, slapping the table again. Says he wants to be child-free, and actually went and got a vasectomy. I've got things to deal with, Professor Graham said, flicking his sleeve as he left. Take care of Ethan. I stood there dumbfounded, my stiff gaze slowly turning to the man on the hospital bed. Don't start imagining things, Ethan said, propping himself up. I was child-free to begin with. Don't stay just because you're moved or... I threw myself straight into his arms. He froze in shock. I'm not moved. I'm not worried about you. And I'm not staying because of you. He stroked my hair, his voice warm with laughter. Then I'll keep trying. A long while passed. I looped my arms around his neck and whispered, okay. Chapter 10. Because we took on new projects, the overseas assignment was extended again. Ethan's research workload was heavy. Even so, he insisted on flying over every week to spend the weekends with me. By the second year, he transferred over as well, taking on the role of team lead for a new project. The long-distance phase finally came to an end. In the fourth year, Ethan proposed beneath the London Eye. At his request, I posted it to my social feed, announcing that I was no longer single. That night, my phone vibrated non-stop. I glanced at it and didn't answer. Another message came in right after. I didn't read it, I blocked the number immediately. The wedding was set for the following spring. Ethan and I officially returned home. Following tradition, on the eve of the wedding I said goodbye to Ethan and went back to my own place. At my doorstep, Chad was slumped on the ground. The air was thick with the smell of alcohol. I stood there for a moment, then took out my phone and called his driver. Chad. He kept his head down, unmoving. I'm sorry, I said. I can't invite you in anymore. His hunched back trembled. How did we end up like this? He sniffed and lifted his face. For a split second, I almost didn't recognize him. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, his eyes red as if he'd just been crying. I fired Lily. I know I was wrong, he said, his chest rising and falling, his right hand struggling to support his head. Can't you give me one more chance? I spent the first 10 years with you. I can't imagine how I'm supposed to live the next 10, without you. The hallway light went out. I leaned slowly against the wall. Of course you live well. Don't look for me anymore. Take good care of the company, it's your life's work. I used to think it was the most important thing, he said, curling his lips in self-mockery. But now I don't know what any of it means. The girl I wanted to take care of is gone. Chad covered his eyes, his shoulders shaking. I can't hold on anymore. You'll get used to it, I whispered. After all, that's how I survived too. The boy who once walked beside me. The Chad who was so good to me. Still broke his vows and chose to hold someone else's hand. Nothing in this world is permanent. Not even the person who once swore to love you forever. In the middle of the night, my phone buzzed. I'm sorry. I kept making excuses, but at some point I admitted to myself that I did stray. I used to think our bond was deep enough that you'd always come back and forgive me. Later I realized, it's precisely because it was deep that you never would. I've always regretted not giving you a complete wedding, not putting a veil on you, not saying vows to you. It's a pity I no longer have the right. I read all 3 messages. Then I swiped left and deleted them. On the wedding day. For the first time, I wore a pure white gown and walked into the church. Standing at the altar, I looked out over the rows of smiling faces. Suddenly, my gaze paused on a patch of gray-blue in the corner. After a moment, I slowly looked away, letting my eyes settle on the man before me, clear-eyed, open-faced, the one I loved. The officiant smiled and nodded. I opened my vows solemnly and spoke softly. I ask everyone here to witness this. I, Anna, take Ethan to be my lawful husband, in sickness and in health, in poverty or in wealth. I promise to never leave her, and to cherish her for the rest of my life. The man in a brand new gray-blue suit murmured the vows, word by word. A thin figure staggered away. Gradually, it disappeared into the crowd. At this point, my love life is a public service announcement. Free of charge.